Okay, so hello and a warm welcome to all. Welcome to Research Circle. I hope I am audible to each and everyone, whoever present via YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and via Research Circle app. Today, we are gathered here for an exclusive webinar, which is titled as a Penning Empirical Research in the New Normal, Challenges, Opportunities, and Realizations. And for this, we have with us our today's speaker, Dr. JESTONI Caprio, uh, is a multi-awarded English language literature, communication, art, and research educator. He is a licensed professional teacher, researcher, writer, and a speaker on multidisciplinary topics. Some of his major awards include second Global Educational Research Award in WHO's Award 2021, Philippines, eminent academician of 2021 by I2OR, that is International Institute of Organized Research, India. Second placer in the National Conference and Demonstration Teaching Festival Academic Development for the Global Leadership in Education, Philippines. First placer for the Best Paper Presenter in International Virtual Conference of Multidisciplinary Research and Paper Presentation in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia 2021. First placer for the best research paper in the International Virtual Conference on Multidisciplinary Research, and first placer for the best abstract in International Virtual Conference and Multidisciplinary Research, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia 2021. Also, he got Global Edu Leader Award in Global Educational Summit and Award for 2021. Also got Gawad Fahina 2021 awardee as a Writer of the Year in English for Senior High School. Also got Gawad Pahia 2021 award as a Writer, Content Eminent, and High School and Senior School, Department of Education, Philippines. Outstanding Public Servant 2021. Outstanding Educator of Year 2021, Outstanding Researcher 2021, Lumina Foundation for Integral Human Development, Philippines. Also got CWD Visa Award for Research and Innovation 2020, and Dr. Hornis Casa Honorary Doctor of Letters, Institute for Roma Studies and Researchers of Europe, Serbia. Dr. Honoris Causa Honorary Doctor of Philosophy in Humanity and Peace. Also Dr. Honoris Causa Honorary Doctor for the hard work in various fields of community life. World Benevolent Commission, Indonesia. Jose Rizal Peace Prize, Gawad Rizolino Global Academy for the Human Excellence, Philippines. Excellence Award for the exemplary performance in promoting and supporting United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, United Nations Economic and Social Council, Philippines. Excellence in World Literature Award for the promoting world peace through the literary work, and Mahatma Gandhi Peace Prize Award for the contribution to the Peace Prize, Equality and Human Rights Institution for the Roma Studies and Researcher, Europe, Serbia. Astia Award in Educational Leadership for the excellence in serving for world peace, humanities, education, and leadership. And the first runner-up in the National Demonstration Teaching Festival 2020, Leadership in Educational Academy for the Development, Philippines. Aside from being a researcher and educator, he has served as a panelist, a resource speaker, and paper presentations in both national and international seminars. He has served as an editor and peer-reviewed of the select research journals in English language and literature studies and educational management and leadership. He has published some of his work in peer-reviewed journals, gazettes, and magazines. Moreover, he has been involved in the various humanities and outreach activity conducted by some organizations where he is either an officer or a member. He has also a Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in English as a class valedictorian and top 1 among the BSc students, best among the English majors, and best in on-campus and off-campus teaching at International Teachers College, Manila. So without wasting further time, I would like to invite Mr. Dr. Justino Caprio. Please, you can continue, sir.
A pleasant day to one and all. Am I audible and can you see my slide presentation now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so thank you so much for that response. Now, before I begin, I would like to acknowledge and, of course, say my words of gratitude to the organizers and, of course, the founder and chairman, the dynamic leaders and officers of the research circle. Likewise, I would like to greet my fellow educators, researchers, and scholars who are currently attending or watching us on our Facebook live streaming or live streaming even on other social media platforms. So once again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to one and all. It is indeed an honor and pleasure to be given the chance to be one of the resource speakers in this academic event that is actually spearheaded by the research circle. You know what? Before I introduce something about myself, I'm really thankful and happy or glad since despite this pandemic, we are still able to do such kind of activity like this, conducting webinars, conferences, or even colloquia, so that we could really adhere to the principle that education or learning must continue amidst any crises. And you know what? I'm a firm believer of one of the famous scientists in the name of Albert Einstein, and I quote, he said, and I quote, learning starts from birth and it will only end at death, just like what we're doing now. Therefore, learning must continue amidst any crisis or amidst any situation. Despite the pandemic, we have to continue doing this kind of academic activity. So once again, I'm indeed honored and it is my pleasure to be given the chance to be your resource speaker for today, who would deliver on the topic that something that is very close to my heart, that is penning empirical research in a new normal, challenges, opportunities, and realizations. So I am Dr. JESTONI P, CARPIO, an English language, literature, communication arts, and a research educator from the Department of Education, Philippines, and also designated as our school information coordinator. Without further ado, allow me to start my presentation by giving you this question. I just hope that our moderators and organizers would take picture of my presentations because I could not do it all together. May I request the organizer or moderator to do it for me? Taking picture. Thank you
Yes,
so
sir,
much.
we'll do that.
Thank you so much. So let me start my presentation by asking you this question. What has made you busy since the start of this pandemic? So probably those who are on this platform, on the Zoom, could type in their answers and then I'm going to read each of your answer. Once again, what has made you busy since the start of this pandemic? If we trace when it actually started, it started in the year 2019. That is why the term is COVID-19. But in some other countries, they started the lockdowns or different kinds of lockdowns or quarantines during 2020. I'm waiting for your responses. What has made you busy since the start of this pandemic? So I'm going to read some of the answers in here. You may type in your answer on our chat box. What has made you busy since the start of this pandemic? To those who are on the Zoom platform, I'm waiting for your answer. What has made you busy since the start of this pandemic? Are the ones who are in the platform typing their answers? Because what I could see on the chat box are just greetings, and we have here, good morning, ma'am. Good morning, ma'am. Please share the bio note on WhatsApp. Yes, sir. Good morning, sir. So once again, I would like those who are on this platform to give me their responses. What has made you busy since the start of this pandemic? Are you typing your answers or I'll be calling somebody on the platform? I think so that we could be responsive. I'm gonna call certain participants in here. I would like to hear from Dr. Lacan Ratod. Please do make a correction if ever I'll be mispronouncing your name. Adapting to the changes that are happening or that have been happening. That's correct. What about for Rajinder Kumar? Adapting with the changes in the situations. That's correct. Thank you so much, Dr. Lacan Ratod. If, and adapting to the changes with the situation in our lives. That's correct. Very good. What about the others? So others probably have ideas in their minds, but they could not express it through typing it here. Probably they are just shy to tell us what they have been doing since the start of this pandemic. Well, anyway, I'm thankful that somebody responded in here. But if you have ideas in mind, probably if we're gonna put it in one picture, we could actually formulate this collage or picture. So this one is our collage. Probably some of you have these ideas in mind. So these are the pictures that we could come up with, or one collage that we could come up with, given your ideas in mind and given the answer a while ago. Now let's focus on the individual picture in here. Let's go back to the question. What has made us busy since the start of this pandemic? So probably some of us have made ourselves busy through strengthening our faith with someone behind this life, whoever that someone is, because we belong to different religions, right? We have different beliefs or religious beliefs. But the fact remains that some others have started strengthening their faith or their connection with that someone behind this life, or spirituality, strengthening spirituality. While second one, some others have grabbed this opportunity, the pandemic, to be able to strengthen their bonds with their families or loved ones, right? Since majority of us have been into work from home setup. I just don't know in the context of India or in other countries, but in the Philippines, since the start of the pandemic in 2020, majority of the works or the workplaces have closed, and the works have been done in the comforts of our homes or houses. So this is another thing. While still others have used this opportunity to do physical fitness or to be active in terms of doing exercise and other physical activities. And of course, we know for the fact that this is important since the COVID-19 itself calls for focusing on our good health. So that's one thing that we could do, physical fitness. While still others have used the opportunity to beautify themselves or for aesthetic purposes, just like what you can see on the given picture. While others have used the opportunity to do job searching, since many of the people around the world, not only in the Philippine context, have lost their jobs. So they grabbed the opportunity to look for the job so that they could sustain their living. Another. While still others have used the opportunity to have an income or an extra income through doing electronic businesses or online selling, just like what you can see on the given picture. Others have used the opportunity to play their favorite games, online games, be it mobile games or computer games. And nowadays, actually, these computer games or mobile games have also been used for extra income. I don't know whether you are familiar with Axie. That Axie is something or a game where somebody could generate an extra income. That's another thing. While still others have used the opportunity to utilize different social media platforms, just like TikTok, Facebook, Meta or Meta nowadays, YouTube. Others have started becoming vloggers, and this also could be a source of income for others or a way for them to express their thoughts and feelings. And others have used the opportunity to still continue doing humanitarian works, just like what you can see on the picture, through doing or continuously doing outreach activities. Others have used the time wisely, the pandemic, to still continue learning despite distance or boundaries. So some others have enrolled themselves in online courses. They have continued studying through enrolling in graduate school, and everything was done in an online manner or way or modality. So e-learning. While others have used the opportunity to continue learning by simply reading books or materials, be it academic books or non-academic books. You might be surprised in the last picture. So there is this man having question marks in both sides. Now, what does it mean? It only means that everything that's going to happen in the future is still uncertain because we don't know, nobody could predict whether this situation we are currently into would continue or we would still go back to the traditional things that we have been doing, and nobody knows that, right? So everything is still uncertain, everything is still in question. Now, ladies and gentlemen, fellow educators, researchers, academicians, and scholars, if we're going to look at the pictures we have in here, among educators, scholars, academicians, there is commonality among the things that we have been doing since the start of this pandemic. And if given the chance, I would like to dart everybody's attention on the two or on the last two pictures, this one and this one. Now, what do you think is the commonality among the things that we have been doing? Now, answering my own question, probably we could say that the common things that we have been doing is studying and researching. Again, I'm talking about the activities of educators, scholars, researchers, and fellow academicians. So these are the things that are commonly or that we have been commonly doing since the start of this pandemic. We have been studying and researching. But the question or the problem in here is, how do we actualize research writing or simply researching during the pandemic time or even after this pandemic, which is what we call as post-pandemic? That's a challenge among us, right? How do we do it, or how will we do it in the future? You know what? Research is very important, I can tell you as early as now. Because the moment you wake up in the morning, you ask something, you inquire about something. When you look for an answer about something, you are already researching. That's the beauty of research. You ask about something, you inquire about something, that's already research. So the situation is something challenging, right? But will it hinder us to still do research? Just remember what one of the famous personalities in the name of Neil Armstrong had said. And according to Neil Armstrong, research is creating new knowledge. Therefore, despite the crisis, despite the pandemic, despite any kind of situation, we must continue doing research. For otherwise, there will be no creation of new knowledge. Because it's very clearly said in here that research is where we get or where we create knowledge. Therefore, if we will not continue to do research, there will be no new knowledge, right? Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to discuss with you penning empirical research in the new normal, challenges, opportunities, and realizations. But before anything else, before I proceed with my formal discussion of the topic, the ones that I'll be sharing with you probably are not new to you, but I'll be injecting a little things or those processes that really have been affected or impacted by this situation, which is the COVID-19. Definitely, it's not only education, not only the curriculum, not only the learning delivery modality or the way and how we teach our learners, not only the learning resources, not only the way and how we do assessment, not only the way on how we do research has been affected, but the processes of doing research have been really affected by this situation. So once again, it's not something new to you, but I'll be injecting things that are a little new because of our situation. Now let me start. So to formally start with my discussion, it is very important for me to chart your line of thinking by providing you what are to be discussed in this presentation. So number one, in my discussion, you will be able to revisit the significant concepts in writing and empirical research. Number two, we are going to be able to discuss the challenges and also the opportunities in writing empirical researches in both the pandemic and even the post-pandemic era. And number three, we'll be able to identify timely topics for writing empirical researches in education. Let me ask you before I continue, can you still hear me? Am I audible? Can you
Yes,
hear
sir.
me? Thank you so much. Tell me if my connection sometimes is intermittent, so you have to tell me if you'll not be able to hear any a single word. Well, anyway, let's dart your attention to the next one. By the way, you are now guided with regard to my discussion. I just would like to inform you as well that whenever I'm giving a talk on research, I do not start by giving the definition of research. But in my case, I do unlock certain terms or concepts related to research. So let's start talking about research. Whenever we talk about research, there are actually two types of research activities, and these are according to Ward et al. In the year 2014. So we have the so-called library research and empirical research. Once again, these are called as the two types of research activities. Quantitative and qualitative research are actually called research approaches or methodologies. And when we speak of two types of research activities, this pertains to library research and empirical research. So forget about quantitative and qualitative research because when you say activities, library, and empirical research, approach of research or methodology of research, then we mention quantitative and qualitative research. Let's continue. So these are the two types of research activities. Number one is library research, and this involves the paradigm shift from knowing the topic to reading academic texts to simple academic writing or simply writing an essay. If we're going to look at the concepts here or the sub-processes involved in doing library research, then we could conclude that this one is the easier type of research activity because this is what we do whenever we prepare for assignment, we prepare for report, we prepare for our project, or simply when we are trying to write an academic essay. So we read and then later on we write whatever we have read. We put them together. We form introduction, body, and conclusion to formulate our academic essay. And that is what we call as a library research. So this one is the simpler type of research activity. On the other hand, we have the so-called empirical research, and this one involves a paradigm shift from knowing the topic to reading academic texts, and also involves methodological or scientific actions, also involves rigorous academic writing. So from the term rigorous, this will tell us, the word rigorous in here would tell us that this one is more difficult research activity compared or as contrasted to the previous one because it has lots of, or it has more sub-processes. The ones that you can read in here. Now, what is this one? This is what we prepare if ever we would like to be able to pass in a particular subject that requires us to write empirical research. And this is something that we do to be able to acquire or to obtain a particular degree program. For example, if we wish to finish college, we could not be able to finish college without working on a research paper, right? And defending it later on or having it passed later on. That's a requirement. That is why when you look at the title page, you could immediately see the words impartial fulfillment of the requirements for this subject or for this degree program. So that's one thing. A requirement in a subject to be able to pass in a subject. Another thing is that it is a requirement for us to acquire a particular degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, or even doctorate or doctoral degree. And we call it as the pure research or applied research. And these are according to Ward et al. In 2014. Let's proceed. Also important for us to talk about are the general characteristics of empirical research. When you check on various references about research, you might find out that there are different characteristics, but in my case, I'll just give you the general characteristics, and there are three, and these are according to Barot and Citation 2016. So these are purposive, scientific, and systematic. By the way, these general characteristics are common in both quantitative and qualitative research approaches. Let's have the first one. So the first characteristic is the so-called purposive. If we're gonna look at the structure of the word, then we could get here the root word, which is purpose, or synonymous with the word aims or goals. Now, what is the importance of having the purpose or being purposive of a research paper? If we're going to take a look at the process as to how we start our research, it's not only topic conceptualization that we do whenever we are starting writing a research. It is very important as well that you are able to identify your goal or purpose. You ask yourselves, what is my purpose in the first place? Why do I have to conduct this study? So you ask that one. When you ask that particular question, you're actually identifying your reason or purpose for doing the research or working on that particular topic. Aside from that one evidence that research is purposive, when you check on the research paper, be it IMRAD format or chapter paper format, I mean, when I say chapter paper format, chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, that's the format that we follow here in the Philippines. I don't know in your country or in your countries, but in our country, we follow that chapter format, chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, what am I trying to tell you here? If you're gonna check every chapter, you have to be able to see, or you will be able to see the statement of purpose for that particular chapter. Chapter 1, there's this statement of purpose. Chapter 2, etc., etc. So purposive. Another thing that I'll add in here, why do we have to identify our purpose? Because in the first place, our purpose is comparable to a light, something that will serve as our guide throughout the process of doing the paper, and even up to the time that you will be defending it or presenting it in a conference or having your paper published in a reputable journal. Later on, I'll remind something on journal publication that's part of my discussion as well. Meantime, let's proceed. The second characteristic of empirical research is the so-called scientific. Excuse me, am I still audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. To those who are on the platform, I would like to request you to mute yourselves so that I can continue doing the discussion. Thank you so much. Now, the second characteristic is scientific. When you say scientific, when we go back to the basic definition of science, then science has been defined in most references. It has been defined as the systematized body of knowledge based on fact or truth that governs people's lives. And that's very true even in research writing. So we have here the key terms, facts or realities. What does it mean? In everything we do in research writing, be it gathering the data or even presenting the data, presenting, analyzing, interpreting the data, all of these processes must be based on reality and facts. Therefore, manipulating the data so that it would be in accordance to your will, or so that the result would appear good among the readers of your research, is a no-no. Whenever you are writing a research, is a violation. Remember that we have one of the ethics in writing the research, and that is academic honesty. So nobody is allowed to manipulate the data or invent or fabricate data or information to be included in the paper that he or she is writing. So facts or realities, scientific. Also related to the second one is the third one, because when I defined science earlier, my definition was it's systematized. Therefore, if research is scientific, we could also describe it as something systematic. Now, what do you mean by systematic? We have the key terms in here, methods and steps. In research writing, we do follow steps, right? It would be very impossible for one to gather data immediately without him or her constructing questions or identifying the problem first, right? Because at the end of the day, what is the purpose of gathering the data? The answer is for the researcher to be able to answer the question that he or she has formulated. And these questions are included in the statement of the problem or the questions in the introductory part. So we follow steps or procedures. It's like the one that you can see on the picture here. It's comparable to ranks of ladder in which it would be very impossible for you to proceed to the fourth step without you undergoing first the initial step. Can you imagine that this person would be able to go here without going here? That could be possible, but in the process of research, we have to make it step by step. That is why systematic. Aside from that one, there are parts that we have to follow. So this is an indication or an evidence that research is indeed systematic. Once again, the three characteristics are purposive, scientific, and systematic. Now, another thing, just like what I was telling you earlier, the things that I will be talking about here are not new to you, but I'll be injecting things that really have been affected or impacted by our current situation, the global health crisis, the COVID-19 health crisis. So let's talk about the basic processes of doing your empirical research. Number one is, of course, before we could write our research, we think of our topic first. What topic do we have to work on? And some of the suggestions that I could give my audience or learners on my discussion about research is that whenever you are conceptualizing or think of your topic, make sure that the topic number one is feasible. When you say feasibility of the topic, it could be worked on. And this could be worked on will still be in accordance to your number one, ability. Can I do it myself? Do I have the capability or capacity? You check on that as well. If you could not work on that because of your ability and capability, then do not work on that particular topic. Think of another topic instead. Number two, finances. Of course, there are other institutions that would offer us research funding, but in most cases, in our cases as researchers, always remember that we would shell out something. We would spend any amount of money. So think of your finances as well. Consider that one whenever you are thinking of the topic to work on your research. What else? Third one is that the topic that I am going to work on specific. So you also consider the specifications of the topic or being specific of the topic. That is why we have this so-called from broad topic to specific topic. You have to do it to do that kind of process, being specific with the topic to work on. And ladies and gentlemen, since I am an educator, researcher, and academician in the Philippines, the topics that I could suggest, actually, these are the topics that we are working on in the workplace or in the department where I'm currently connected to, the Department of Education. So these are some timely topics that you might work on. So these are in the Philippine contexts. But you may also do this in your country, probably. Some of the topics that we could work on as researchers. So in the pandemic time, researchers could work on the effects of pandemic to and even on the preparedness of some people, just like the teachers or the learners, in terms of the following: curriculum, learning resources, learning delivery, assessment, technology in education, and even TPAKE of educators and learners. When you say TPAKE, it means technological, pedagogical, and content knowledge and expertise of both learners and the teachers or educators. So you might think of this topic. While transitioning from pandemic time or post-pandemic time, after this pandemic, you may work on the effectiveness of modified or newly made curriculum, learning resources, learning delivery, assessment, technology, and education, and even TPAKE of learners and educators. Now, you can see that these are similar with the listed topics earlier because we are still talking about education, and these are some important elements of the educational process. So you might work on this. Now, you might be surprised on this. There are still question marks. Just like what I told you earlier, everything is still uncertain about what's going to happen in the post-pandemic time. So we do not know what kind of topic to work on still related to curriculum, learning resources, learning delivery, assessment, technology, and education, or TPAKE of educators and learners. Once again, these question marks are indicative that everything is still uncertain or we're not sure what's going to happen in the education system, not only in the Philippines, but even in the entire world. While still others, there are some other topics in the Philippine context that some of my fellow educators, scholars, and researchers have been working on, and you, my fellow audience here, could also work on if you would replicate the same topics. So you might work on learner diversity and student inclusion. This is very important too because we are still dealing with the learners, right? And the only difference is that the modality and the way and how we deliver everything. But still, we are dealing with the same learners who are coming from diverse backgrounds and those who have certain conditions. That is why we could work on diversity and student inclusion or people with special needs. You could also work on content and pedagogy of the program. So there's another topic. Assessment and reporting in the program, because the way on how we do assessment is also a challenge among educators and teachers or professors, right? In the traditional things the way on how we have been doing it, we could see our learners face to face. But the challenge is the way on how we do assessment. We could not control the kinds of learners we have. It's actually, you know what, just to share with you, whenever I do administer an assessment among my learners, I would always tell them of the concept of integrity and honesty because I could not see them whenever I'm giving them an assessment or an activity to accomplish. They could do anything they want. They could probably consult someone who is more knowledgeable about the topic that I'm letting them accomplish or an assessment that I'm letting them accomplish. They could search everything in the net or read materials that is in front of them, right? Nowadays, everything is at the tips of our fingers whenever we search for something on the net, right? So that's another challenge. Another thing, of course, the 21st century skills, we should not forget that as well. And even ICT integration in education. So what about 21st century skills? We might work on the 4 C's. We have communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity of learners and teachers. Other topic, we have curriculum contextualization, localization, and indigenization. There's another challenge among educators, teachers, and professors probably. What is the reason for including this one? In my experience as an educator and researcher, it is very crucial for me to include this process in teaching my learners in a sense that if the material or the way on how I teach the topic is contextualized or localized or indigenized, then I can see that there is better learning among my learners. Quality learning takes place among my learners because the more that the concept of contextualization, localization, and indigenization is that the things that are more connected, or the things that where learners could connect with, they could learn it better. So this is another thing that we could work on: contextualization, localization, and indigenization. Another thing is the community linkages to support curriculum. We have to remember that all those people around the school, the community itself, each of the members of the community plays an important role in the school. They are actually considered as the stakeholders of the school. So we could also work on this kind of topic. Other thing is the professional growth of the teacher. Since we are the comfort of our homes and houses, can we still pursue professional growth and development? This is another challenge, right? How many teachers or educators have been continuing professional development amidst this pandemic? How many teachers have been enrolling themselves in courses, online courses, attending in graduate school, or even attending in online seminars and conferences? This is another thing that we have to work on. And also we have emerging and urgent issues and concerns affecting the teaching and learning process. So we are still on the first process, but there are a lot of things that I would like to say on this. But meantime, these are some of the processes or topics that I could share with you. But there are a lot of topics that you could work on. And if given the chance, before I continue with my talk, I would like to have another episode or webinar if the organizer of the research circle would give me a chance to be invited again as your speaker. I would talk about evaluating sources and writing the paper itself, in particular, citing sources. That's very crucial whenever you are writing your research. Are you still with me, participants? Can you hear me? Are you still with me? Hello? Are you still with me? Okay, thank you so much. At least I could guarantee that you are still with me, listening with me. Now, the second one is identifying the problem and asking questions. So when we check on this, not so muchly affected by the pandemic. So the same process. We could do the same all practices the way in how we identify the problem and ask questions. But the first one that's very affected, right? Conceptualizing the topic. This one is another thing that is affected by the situation we are currently into, the pandemic. The way in how we read and write references. Bear this in mind. I don't know in your countries, but in the Philippines, we are not really allowed to go to academic institutions or to go to the physical library to be able to read and do research or read references that we could use for our literature review. Because when I speak of reading and writing references here, ladies and gentlemen, we are not going away with preparing our literature review or preparing the things that we are to cite in our research paper, because these are very important, right? Remember that when you are starting your research, there must be a ground or base for everything that you will do in the process. And that could be supported by preparing your literature review. Now, what's the challenge in here now? Just like what I mentioned earlier, we are not allowed to go to the physical library, and we are not allowed to go to the school or academic institution. So will this hinder us in doing our literature review, which is a very important part of research writing? The answer is no, because it'll do something about our situation. Remember that there are reputable online sources. Online sources, a reminder is to evaluate the materials, because evaluation of materials before reading the entire text is very crucial on the part of the researcher or the one working on a research paper. And when you evaluate the materials, it only means that you are checking the material in terms of its content, language, and format. Now, why is this important? It is important for us to check or evaluate the materials that we're going to read and use in our research writing, so that later on we will not be telling ourselves that we just wasted our time, effort, and energy reading that material or reading these materials that are not relevant to the topic that we are working on, or that would help us in preparing an effective or quality research paper. So you check on the following. You check on the author, you check on the currency, and in the case of the academe, the ones that are accepted are the materials that would not go beyond 5 years. That's in the Philippines. I don't know whether in your country you also follow the same thing. But in the case of the Philippines, in most academic institutions, we do limit the materials that the learners would use within 5 years. So going back, since we are now in 2022, the ones that are allowed are actually the ones written from 2016. Am I correct? 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So these ones, or 2017, 2017. So 5 years. That's currency. You also check on documentation. So you check on the author, you check on the credentials of the writer. That also bears importance with the content of the work. For example, if you are working in science, then what do you expect about the writer of that material? The writer must be specialized in science and not in linguistics or English, because the credibility of the writer is also in question. So you check on the authority. You check on the year. Documentation is the third one that you have to check. When you check on the documentation, it means that you are checking whether the materials that you are reading or research articles that you are reading have lots of citation, or it follows certain style guides in citation. Why is this important? Because we could say that the material is credible if it has lots of citation. We could claim that this material that we are reading is a product of research also. And then check on the intended audience, check on the objective or purpose. Also check whether the topic is relevant to the topic you are working on, just like what I was telling you earlier. If I am working on reading education, then the materials that I would read are materials that are about reading education. It would be very impossible for me to work on reading education research if I'm gonna read on topics such as botany, science, political science, and all other areas of specialization, right? So you also check on relevance. But my point in here, so that you will not be wasting time, effort, and energy reading something, research articles in particular, you check or evaluate the materials that you would read. I would skip this one. So we have types of literature. But there are types of literature, just for you to know. We have conceptual literature, we have research literature, and we have the gray literature. But what I would like to highlight in here, since I was telling you that even reading and writing references have been affected by this COVID-19 pandemic, our situation as the ones doing research has been affected. In particular, this process, we could still work on writing our good or effective literature review by getting the information from reputable journals. So these are some of the journals where we could access or get information for our literature review. Bear this in mind. And another thing, but I'll be reminding you later on, so you may use online sources of information, but do check or evaluate. And also, since we're talking about writing the references, we have the in-text citation or reference citation. You have to remember the style guide that you are about to use in your research writing. And the style guide that the researcher would use would definitely be based on his or her area of specialization, just like what you can see in here. So we have APA. This one is the style guide used in the following specializations or disciplines. We have psychology, education, hotel and restaurant management, business, economics, and other social sciences. For MLA, this one is used for literature, arts, and humanities. IEEE, which stands for Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, is used in all engineering fields. So be it civil engineering, mechanical engineering, computer engineering, etc. IEEE is recommended style guide. We have AMA. This one is a style guide used for medicine, health, and sciences, and other natural sciences. And we have the Chicago Style Guide. This one is used when you get the information from the following materials, such as reference books, non-academic periodicals, examples, newspapers, magazines, and journals, and among others. Now, the next process is also affected by this pandemic because, as what I told you, it would be very impossible for one to gather data by going to an academic institution. For example, in my case, when I was working my dissertation in my first doctoral degree, I was really forced to gather data in the comfort of my home. So how was I able to do interviews? Since, just to share with you, I actually worked on the mixed methods research about dynamic leadership. So how was I able to interview the administrators of those schools or institutions where I gathered the data? I did it through online platform, ladies and gentlemen. So I made use of Google Meet, and I also made use of Zoom platform to gather data, while still others who were not able to respond to attend to my interview process that was conducted using such platforms. I conducted the interview using Facebook Messenger or Facebook video chat. So it's a matter of being thinking of innovative ways of how you will do something, just like this one. How will we be able to identify, construct, validate, and test research instruments? So let's focus on this one now. Sometimes there are existing instruments that are considered as structured or standardized rather that we could use also in our research. The only thing in here is that if there are existing instruments, you have to ask for the permission of the original author or owner of that. Otherwise, you might be accused of stealing someone else's academic or intellectual property. So that's a no-no in research. That's also one of the ethics. You ask for permission of the owner of that. But that could be possible. And that would be that would simplify the process on the part of the researcher because it would eliminate the next word that I'll be mentioning, and that is constructing, validating, and testing your research instrument. So if there's an already existing instrument, we could say that that one is standardized. Therefore, there is no need for validation and pilot testing of the instrument. However, in such cases that you are working on the topics that there are no existing instruments, or probably you are not allowed by the owner of that instrument to use that in your own research, then you will be obliged to construct your own, given the fact that it would be validated and pilot tested. Now, why do we have to perform validation and pilot testing? So that we could tell everybody we are proud to say that the instrument that we use in gathering our data for our research exhibit validity and reliability. And validity and reliability are very important characteristics of research instrument. So that's it. Also connected to this one, how do we gather data? So we could do the survey. Since we are in the pandemic, we are working in the comforts of our home. We could do this by using Google Meet, the Zoom platform, or even Microsoft platform. So these are virtual platforms that we could use to be able to conduct interview. And the beauty of this one is that you could easily record the conversation you would have with your interviewee. Unlike before, in the traditional way as to how we do interview, we have to go to their place and then have the recording with us. But of course, before you record the data gathering, you have to ask for the consent of that person. Remember the Data Privacy Act. I don't know whether you have such law in your country, but in the Philippines, we have the so-called Data Privacy Act. Therefore, we ask for the informed consent of the person with whom we'll gather the data. Example, in the interview, they have to sign certain documents so that it will be a proof that we are really allowed to record the process of interview or gather the data from them. Another thing, so aside from these platforms that I was telling you, which you could use to conduct your interview, if ever you are working on qualitative research, in the quantitative side, you could work on using Google Forms or other online survey platforms to be able to gather data for your quantitative research. So there are a lot of ways. Actually, even Facebook, you could use that one. You send the questions and then you wait for their answers. We could gather the data immediately. So it's just a matter of doing or looking for solutions to problems. That's why if you go back to my title, challenging, but we see opportunities from these. The way on how we gather data because of the situation is very challenging, but we still look for opportunities as to how we would gather the data. That's the very reason why I have that kind of title. Let's be proactive instead of being reactive. We look for solutions to the situations or look for solutions to the problems at hand. So gathering the data. There are a lot of ways, but these are some of the things that I could recommend for you if you are currently researching or planning to do research in the future. And then presenting, analyzing, interpreting the data, not so muchly affected. I'll skip this one. 7 is writing the research report, also not that affected because writing the research report, if you are going to let somebody check your work, it would be easy. It would be done easier if you would send it through email to your advisor if ever you have a research advisor or research professor who would check your work. So you could send it through email or you could just send the link of the uploaded files on the Google Drive. And you know what? Just a tip among all researchers and fellow scholars in here, it would be easy for the one who would check your research to check also on the grammar, since if they open the file in the Google Drive, in particular the Word file, they would immediately see grammatical errors in that or spelling errors. So they could easily check, or you could easily check and make a correction of the errors in structure of your writing through these platforms. This one is another thing that is so muchly affected by this pandemic or COVID-19. So the way in how we share research paper. Before, we tend to have our research defense to those who are enrolled in research courses, or be it in bachelor's, master's or doctorate. Before, we used to conduct the final defense of paper in the face-to-face context, right? But nowadays, lots of universities, lots of schools, majority of the institutions have been conducting the research defense in an online way or in online modality. So there's another innovation or probably opportunity that these scholars were able to see based on the challenge that's existing. So that's one thing. Most research defense have been conducted since the start of this pandemic, have been conducted in online platform. In the same manner, even the research conferences, even the webinars, the colloquia, all these things have been conducted in an online platform, right? Just like what we're doing at the moment. Supposedly, if I will be invited by the research circle, I would really be enthusiastic going to your country, for example, in India, to deliver my talk. But since we are still in the pandemic and we could conduct this kind of activity in online platform, here we are doing it in the online platform, right? So we are sharing ideas, thoughts, and even research in the online platform. We have been doing conferences, colloquia, webinars in online platform. Another thing. So aside from conferences, as one of the ways as to how we could share our research output or research works, even the way on how we publish our research in reputable journals now have been conducted or have been done online. You might be able to notice that there are a lot of publications who have been offering online journal publications, right? But be mindful of this, ladies and gentlemen. Whenever you are publishing your paper in a journal, please do remember that reputable journals do not uh, do not actually ask for any fee or payment. Remember this. They do not ask, reputable journals do not ask for any payment, any single amount you will not give them. On the other hand, there is this so-called predatory journals in which they would ask for a certain amount. So be cautious of that one. The only difference is that predatory asks for publication fee or processing fee, and your paper will be published. While the other one, the reputable journals, would not ask for any a single amount, but the process is very, it will take you longer time. If you're aware of publication is in Scopus Index journal, it would take you not just months, but sometimes a year or more. So be cautious of that. And since I've been mentioning a publication as one of the ways as to how we could share our research work or outputs, ladies and gentlemen, before we could publish our work in a research journal, we have to transform it into IMRAD format. So what is an IMRAD format? IMRAD stands for Introduction, which contains this, Methodology, which contains this, Results, which contains this, and Discussion, which contains the following. So imagine if your paper is a chapter paper which probably contains 500 page. If you wish to publish it in a reputable journal or sometimes even in a predatory journal, this ones that ask for payment, they would require to transform the chapter paper to IMRAD format. So transforming it from a 500 page, that's just an example, from 500 page paper down to around 10 to 20 page paper, which follows the IMRAD format. So these are the parts. And ladies and gentlemen, these are the basic processes as to how we publish our paper in a journal. So you complete your research if you have the research with you, prepare the manuscript, and preparing the manuscript would mean following the formats that is required or guidelines required by this particular publishing house or publication. So it depends upon where you are publishing your paper. You prepare it according to their guidelines or formats. And then afterwards, you submit the manuscript. The manuscript would undergo the review. And there are different kinds of review. We have the blind review, or we have the double blind review, in which you do not really know who reviews the paper. We also have the blind review, in which the person, the reviewer knows you, but you do not know who reviews your paper. Let me explain again. Let me go back. When you say double blind review, both of you do not know each other. The one who will review your paper does not know who owns the paper or who the researcher is. In the same manner, you as a researcher or the owner of the paper does not know or do not know who will review your paper. When you say blind review, so that's double blind review. When you say blind review, you don't know who will review the paper, but the one who reviews the paper knows who owns that particular research paper. So these are two types of review process. But definitely the next one is manuscript reviewing. Now later on, the review will lead them to the decision, be it rejected or accepted. And in such cases, if it will be accepted, of course, in most cases, it's not a perfect paper yet, right? So the decision would be accepted, but it will go back to the same process since you have to revise your paper. So you revise it again and submit the paper again, and it will undergo the second review. And then here comes another decision until such time that the paper will be accepted for publication. So that's it. These are the basic processes. And next step is this one, proofreading and editing the research. What do you notice if you're gonna take a look at the process I've been discussing with you? Each of the process has numbers in them. Let's go back. You check on this one. So this one is number 7, right? This one is number 8. What about this one? It doesn't have number in it. But still, this is something that is very crucial in the process of conducting empirical research. Why is it that it doesn't have numbers in it or number in it, right? Proofreading and editing the research. This is the reason, ladies and gentlemen. Proofreading and editing can happen in any of the processes. For example, you conceptualize your topic in research. What will you do later on? You let somebody check it. For instance, your professor or your advisor, and then if they would have suggestions for betterment of your topic or for further improvement of the topic you are trying to propose to them, then they would give their suggestions, and then later on you would proofread it and edit it, right? Second step, what was the second step I mentioned earlier? Reading and writing references. So imagine that you already have read and written your literature review. Of course, you would let your advisor or your research teacher or professor to check it. They would see errors or they would have better suggestions for the improvement of that work of your literature review. Then later on, you would proofread and edit it. What am I telling you? In every step of the way, in every process, proofreading and editing research can happen. Because the common notion of researchers and writers and educators, proofreading and editing only happens at the last part. But definitely not, it could happen in every step of the way, in every process. Now, let's talk about the purposes. I asked you earlier, why do we have to conduct research in the first place? Let's go back to one of the characteristics I mentioned earlier. There are three which I mentioned. Number one is purposive. So here comes the very reason why we say that empirical research writing is purposive in nature. What are the purposes? Why do we have to conduct empirical research? Number one, firstly, to solve problems, right? There are existing problems, and what do we have to do? We look for answer or solutions to problem, then we do research. Number two, we do research to be able to contribute to the fund of knowledge and community. But let me tell you something about it. Contributing to the fund of knowledge does not necessarily mean that you only finish a paper. What will you do after finishing the paper? How will you contribute to the fund of knowledge that will further on contribute to the community where you are a part of? Of course, you have to present your results, your findings, your data, so that people would know it. They would learn your research. There's a way in how that would contribute to the fund of knowledge. Another thing, so that it would reach the general audience or the larger audience, you publish the paper. In that way, you are contributing to the fund of knowledge and community. Because you have to remember that it's not only you who will be the researcher. Other people would be researchers as well. That's why we have future researchers. So who knows, they might use your work as their reference or basis for the research that they are conducting as well, right? So contribute to the fund of knowledge. Number three, replicate ideas with uniqueness and identity. What does it mean? Dr. JESTONI CARPIO, am I allowed to copy a research? Not really copy, but to test whether what's conducted in India, for instance, could I also try it in the Philippine context? The answer is yes, only that you have to maintain your uniqueness and identity. Replicating doesn't mean that you will copy the entire paper. You'll just try the methodology, whether it works in some other local or context, right? But you have to maintain uniqueness and identity. Otherwise, you might be accused of plagiarism or stealing someone else's intellectual property. But you may replicate that one. So let's say in India, in one university, they do this kind of research. Can the other universities in India do the same thing? The answer is yes, they could replicate it, but they will not be allowed to copy the entire research paper. Fourth is propose something new. You see the beauty of research in here. Everything that exists, specifically the material things, are products of research. I'm not talking about the living things, but I'm talking about the material things that are existing. For example, the medicines that would cure illnesses, right? These are all products of research. It underwent researches, it underwent trials before it before these medicines had been marketed to the public. So one very good example, the vaccines that we're currently having that would somehow lessen the cases of COVID-19. This underwent researches and trials of experts. So to propose something new. And lastly, most importantly, we do empirical research to improve the quality of life. Now, putting all together, just like what I told you in the beginning of my discussion, I do not really give the discussion or the definition of research in the very start of my discussion, but it will be the other way around. We'll be defining what research is. So, how do we define research now? Now, ladies and gentlemen, my definition of research will be based on what I shared with you or discussed with you. Research will be defined based on the characteristics. It will be defined based on the processes I discussed with you. It will also be defined based on the purposes that I just shared with you. Now, how do we define research? Let me read to you my definition. Let me define research. So putting all those things together, research can now be defined as a purposive, scientific, and systematic process of conceptualizing the topic, identifying the problem and asking questions, reading and writing references, identifying, constructing, validating, testing research instruments, gathering the data, presenting, wait for a while, gathering the data, presenting, analyzing, interpreting the data, writing the research report, sharing the research, and proofreading and editing the research with the aim or with the purposes of the following: to solve problems, contribute to the fund of knowledge and community, replicate ideas with uniqueness and identity, propose something new, and most importantly, improve the quality of life. So from our discussion, we were able to generate our definition of research. Now, before I end my talk about penning empirical research, I just would like to leave everybody this statement. If you remember my words a while ago, as we wake up in the morning, we ask or inquire about something that's already considered as research. Although that's a simple activity of asking a question, for example, what am I going to eat? In that way, you are already doing the research because you are looking for an answer to your question. You're looking for a solution to the problem that you have, and that is what you will eat. So that's already research. Now, according to Werner von Braun, research is what I'm doing when I don't know what I am doing. So when you ask for solution to a problem, when you inquire about something, when you ask for a solution for something which you do not know, or when you look for an answer for something that you don't know specifically, then you are already doing a research. With that, allow me to end my presentation by leaving you this statement that before, during, and even after these trials and pertaining to the pandemic, opportunities were, are, and will always be around. So I hope that despite the challenges that we encounter in doing our empirical research, we still are able to see silver lining with the situation. We see opportunities with these challenges to be able to continue doing research. Just remember what Neil Armstrong said earlier. Research is important because it's a way for us to create knowledge. Therefore, if we will not be able to do research, we could not be able to create new knowledge that would be used by the future generation. With that, thank you so much, fellow educators, academicians, researchers, and scholars. And thank you so much to the dynamic leaders, organizers, and even the founder and chairman of the Research Circle. Once again, I'm Dr. JESTONI P. CARPIO, an English language, literature, communication arts, and a research educator from the Department of Education, Manila, Philippines. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for this nice presentation. I would like to recommend all the participants, if you have any queries or question, I will try to provide the email ID of Dr. Jestini in the description box of Research Circle YouTube channel, so that you can just type your questions or queries directly to the to their email. So this, let me tell you all, this webinar or this whole session will be available on our Research Circle YouTube channel. So if somebody has missed this, you can just go to the Research Circle YouTube channel and you can watch whole the session there. Okay. So lastly, I would like to thank all the participants who were live from Research Circle YouTube channel, Research Circle Facebook page, and from Research Circle app. I would like to thank all of those who were present there, and thank you so much for your participation as well. And last but not the least, thank you so much, Doctor, for taking out the time and delivering such a nice session. We are hoping for another session from you in the coming days. As you have said during the session, we'll definitely arrange that one very soon. Thank you so much. And with your permission, I would like to conclude our session here.
Before I stop my presentation, I just would like to tell everybody that I already sent my my email address here, so that if ever, just like what was mentioned earlier by Sir, you could ask me questions about my presentation. And if I will still be given the chance next time, I wish to continue discussing still about research, and that is citing sources. So you may ask me questions through these platforms and through sending me your email. Thank you so much. I'll now stop sharing my screen. And I would like, by the way, I would like to request the organizers or moderators to please do send me screenshots of my presentation, because I was not able to do it earlier because I could not multitask screen capturing and having my presentation done. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. I will do that. Thank you.